Welcome to Question Mark, the podcast, exploring the greatest story ever told with open minds and open hearts.
We light it up, we won't come down, and the sun can't stop us now. Watching it come true, it's taking over you. This is the greatest show, where it's covered in all the colored lights, and the runaways are on in the night. Impossible comes true, it's taking over you. This is the greatest show.
Welcome to Question Mark, a no-holds-barred, frank conversation about what some people say is the greatest story ever told, Mark's Gospel. My name is Stephen Smart. I've got to know this Gospel really well because for the last decade or so, I've performed it as a one-man show, I Am Mark. So I'm now really excited that in this podcast, I get the chance to chat about it with all sorts of fabulous guests. Many of them are experts in the field, and all of them have fascinating things to say. If you fancy joining us as we unpack this incredible tale, do stay tuned. And if you like what you hear and you don't want to miss any future episodes, then please click on the subscribe or follow button. This will help other people find the podcast more easily so that they can enjoy it too.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you are having a lovely day. Today, I am so thrilled because I've got my good friend here, Steve Nicholls, to be with me. Steve and I go back a long time. And, well, you'll find out himself. He's one of the funniest gentlemen I know. So, Steve, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how we know each other?
I'm Steve. I live just outside Southampton in Hampshire. Originally from Plymouth in Devon. I moved up here to the Southampton area when I came to university, and that's where I met Steph. I think it was probably in my second year. It was at the CU, and I think Steph, you'd recently become a Christian. You played basketball. I seem to remember at the time, and very good friends with Andy Johnston. And that's really how we got to know each other, and we just sort of hit it off and sort of had a good laugh together. Shared. You know, I would tell you good jokes, and you would tell me bad jokes, and it was a good trade-off, I thought.
I didn't actually have any jokes in my repertoire at all until I met you, and after that, you kept me going in 30 years of teaching. I was able to remind myself of all the jokes you said to me, and I just relayed them to my classes, and they hated it, but I enjoyed it. I absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
That's not entirely true, Steph. You used to come to me with some good. So they were good jokes. I must admit, I never would say they were good jokes because that's you would always groan and then you turn around and tell someone else and pretend it was your own. But you fed me with some good jokes.
Yeah. Do you remember we used to live in that house I had a flat roof and it had a kind of skylight. Do you remember? When you stayed? Yeah. So one morning, I woke up and I looked through the skylight, and I saw a Harrier jump jet landed on our roof.
Hey, you can't nick my joke, mate.
I must have left the landing lights on. You know what I mean? Look, they're all yours, every single one.
Now that was. I do remember your house when you got married, because you and Susie were so fantastic to me, and you had me as your lodger for about a month. It's something I'll never forget because it was a time I really needed it, and you guys just stepped in. I mean, I thought it was a bit rich from you forcing me to take the cat with me when I left, but you know.
You're very kind. You know, it was delightful. I thought it was more than a month. It felt like a year, but maybe.
For me, it only felt like a month because you were such great hosts.
No, well, you were amazing to have. You know, we missed you so much when you left. You know, made new married life far more boring.
And there was a quote that you guys used about the cat, which we use for every other cat since, which is beautiful but thick. And I think that describes all the cats we've had since then.
Yeah, don't get me going on cats. Oh, it's great to see you, Stephen. And today
it's really good to see you.
Thank you. And we're going to be looking at Mark's Gospel again. And we're just going through this story bit by bit because it's so rich with meaning and interest. And the bit we're looking at today is still in chapter 1, but verses 21 to 28. And I'm going to ask my good friend Lucy Warner to read it out for us.
Mark chapter 1, New International Version, chapters 21 to 28. Jesus drives out an impure spirit. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching, because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. Just then, a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," said Jesus sternly. "Come out of him." The impure spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching, and with authority. He even gives orders to impure spirits, and they obey him." News about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee.
So there it is, Steve. Amazing, isn't it? Incredible story, really. I just wonder what your first thoughts are as you read that and listened to it just now.
It's fascinating when you hear a story like that, because you don't often think of the stories necessarily on their own, because there's a narrative that's running through, and you've had in the previous podcasts, the baptism and the things leading up to this. And then you take this off, this isolation, and then you sort of ask yourself, well, what does it actually mean? What is the significance of that? Because it's really just a progression through the life of Jesus. I guess one question that immediately sprung to mind is, for you actually, Steph, is why Mark? Why did you choose Mark's Gospel? Was it purely because it was the shortest, so you had less to learn, or was there any other particular reason?
No, that was a big reason. Actually, I knew that it was full of dramatic incidents like this one. Yeah. Actually, from the word go, it's so quick and it pulls. No punches. It's really fast, and very strange things happen almost all at the same time. So I thought, well, if anything's going to be interesting to watch on stage, it would be something like this. Yeah.
I fully agree with it. It's very impactful. It's the whole language that the Mark is using, and it's all sort of suddenly and now and then and that sort of thing, and then followed up by amazed and wow and that sort of thing. It's almost as if it was written as a big blockbuster trailer, like a marketing spiel or something like that. Yeah. But it's not. It's telling a whole story. It's not just giving you an introduction. It's actually putting it in a way which was, I guess, in language and in style which was appropriate to the audience, which I believe was the Roman Church, which was under persecution or was having troubles at the time. So you've got to read it in the context of and understand it in the context of who it was delivered to. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. It's got that sort of It tells a story, but it's drawing you through. It's not just laying down of what happened, which of course it does do, but it's pulling you through. It's like a good novel, a good film, where you sort of the page turn. You want to find out what happens next, and it's sort of taking you through the life of Jesus.
Yeah, I really resonate with everything you said, Stephen. I think particularly it's really important what you said about recognizing this isn't just an individual episode and forgetting its context. It's the beginning of the story, but there's even some stuff before that, and the stuff before that, which we've looked at in previous podcasts. It is relevant here because, well, Jesus has already started teaching, and there's something about his teaching which comes up again here in this passage. So it's like we need to be seeing things, as a whole, definitely. And I think it's more than a story. I'm totally convinced. I don't know whether you agree with this, but I'm totally convinced that pretty much every line is something being taught, actually, as well as being told. So when it says, Jesus spoke with authority, and it says that a couple of times in this,
it does,
there's a good reason. There's a good reason for that. That word authority is very important to Mark, for whatever reason. Maybe we can talk about that. So there's something going on behind the scenes, behind the action, as it were. He's trying to point us in the right direction, thinking, who is this guy? And why did he come?
I mean, the thing that sprung to mind when I was thinking of authority, because of course it's a comparison between the normal sort of teacher you would have there, which is basically anyone who understands the scriptures. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a rabbi, but there'll be someone there who understood the scriptures. But they would be presenting their interpretation or their view of it. So this is saying he spoke with authority. So this is someone who understands it, or who is potentially the author. It'd be a bit like, I mean, I know you love Thomas Hardy, and I've seen your posts on Facebook with regards to Thomas Hardy. But as a teacher teaching English literature, you'll give an interpretation of what you think that Thomas Hardy meant, what he meant with his character, how it fitted in the context of the time he wrote it.
Yeah.
But how much different would it be if Thomas Hardy was standing there and telling you why he wrote it, what these people meant? That's the difference between the normal teacher they would have in the synagogue and Jesus standing there in front of them. He was telling them with authority. So you sometimes see on TV where the person who they're talking about, the subject, is no longer with us.
Yes.
But then it will be their wife, or it will be their son or their daughter who's speaking. But they also speak with authority. So the difference there is that when we look at it, we say, well, Jesus is speaking with authority because he is the Son of God. Yes. And therefore he is speaking on God's behalf. Yes. But equally, as Christians, we are the sons of God, sons and daughters of God, yes. And therefore we should speak with authority as well. That was being given to us by God. Yeah. So that's what I'm getting when I'm taking the authority. It's a big step up from what they're used to having there. But secondly, they recognised it. Yes. What was it? Was it what he said? Is it the way he said it? Yeah. I don't know. I think it's to me it's probably both of those. It's quite clearly what he said. Yeah. But I think we know that he was someone different. That he drew people to him by who he was, not just what he said.
Yeah, that's right. I love that kind of analogy with Thomas Hardy, and I'm just trying to think, if I was listening, just sitting at the feet, as it were, of Thomas Hardy, and he was talking about his novels, I mean, I'd be awestruck. That would be the effect, not just because he mysteriously come back to life again, but because he was talking.
That wouldn't surprise you then.
It might be a little bit surprising.
What have you been for the last few hundred years?
But it's about this guy, saying what it really is like, what it is about, and they must have been absolutely awestruck themselves. I guess that's what you're implying. I think this idea of authority for me conveys the other point you made about him being the Son of God, because I think that's where Mark starts the story. The very first line of this gospel, which some people say is the actual title, is the beginning of the good news about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. There's something about his status here that's being emphasized for us as a reader, as well as explaining the effect he had on this audience.
Yeah, I think it's clear that it impacted Mark, as well as he wasn't just recording what he'd heard, or what it would have been what he'd heard, because it was the belief that he was with Paul. The general belief is he was with Paul on his first ministry mission journey, and with Peter. So he wasn't necessarily a first-hand observer, but it was something. Therefore, it was something which had impacted him from the telling and the understanding of how it had impacted other people's lives as well. Yeah. And I think that's to me, it doesn't lose anything in that. because he's recording it with passion. And then, as I said before, he knows who he's targeting it at, and it's lasted through all these years, and its impact is just the same as well.
Yeah, I agree. That's brilliant. So what else?
Steph, I've got a question I'd like to ask you. We've seen I've seen you doing Mark, and I've seen this particular passage as well. I'm just interested to know what you're thinking about at the time you're doing those things. Now, I imagine when you first started doing it, it was a case of, I want to get my words right. I want to get it right. But you've done it so many times now. So what do you think about now? Are you thinking about the audience? Are you thinking about what impact it has? What are you actually thinking about?
It's a great question. I think it does vary from one moment of the play, for want of a better word, to another. Sometimes I am still thinking, can I remember the words?
How many words are there?
Oh my goodness. I think there are about 11,000 words as far as
right. Yes, and that sounds like one of the essays I used to do in detention at school. It always felt like that.
Yeah. I must say, it doesn't feel like that to me. I feel every single one of them is like, oh gosh, that's incredible. I mean, I could talk about the effect of those words for ages, but yeah. So it's 11,000, and I do think about that. I do think, oh my goodness, make sure I get it right in the right order. But these days, more and more, I'm trying not to be conscious of that, nor indeed of the audience. In the sense of, I don't want to be put off by how I feel the audience might be responding, but I will try and feed off what, if the response is good, I want to be able to feed off that and react to them. But I think the main thing for me is just being aware of, well, if I'm honest, God. I kind of see this whole thing, doing this performance, as a kind of prayer. I certainly feel it helps me to remember that I'm in God's presence as much as I'm in other people's presence, and to do it for Him. That is my honest, the best way of doing it.
And the more you do it, are you getting more insights, or is it just reinforcing what you've previously thought? Or
wow, no, definitely the first.
Yeah.
So, and because this, I think the Bible is so alive. That's one of the things about this book as a whole that makes it unique, in my opinion. Because of course, any book, isn't just a plain text that can be interpreted once. But the Bible seems to have this potency, this ability to speak to an individual at deeper than intellectual level, at a heart level, at a point where they are personally touched and moved. And beyond any other book, and I've studied literature and taught it for decades, but this book has this ability to read you as much as you reading it. And that's what I love about it. And every time you come to it, there's something new. And even as a performer, having done this so many times, it can hit me between the eyes sometimes, the differences that happen.
Well, I'll make a confession now, Steph. When I first heard, well, I think you told me about it when you were thinking of doing Mark, and I'm sure you can imagine what my reaction was. Really, why are you doing this? Are you qualified to do this? Are you an actor? But I would say, honestly, the times I've seen it, and particularly the one I remember is Pentecost Sunday, which I don't believe was actually Mark. Was it? That was a different passage. But it was then when I saw you, and I could see the passion in you and the intensity in which you were delivering it, and I was won over. I must admit, my cynicism was, that was in the past. It was down. It was going down the plug hole. It was gone. So fair play to you, mate. You had a vision. You followed it through, and you've done a fantastic job with it. And I'm delighted to be able to say I know the guy who does that. No, honestly, I'm I'm not doing it just because it's it's being recorded. I'm saying it because I'm saying it from the heart, because I really mean it.
Well, you and your wife Lynn, you've been amazing in terms of supporting me over the years. I just want you to know that every comment you make, or every like you make, Steve, it means it means the world, really, because I know you're 100% behind me, and just like you've expressed. So bless you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But there's one thing, Steph, I must say.
Yeah, go on.
In that passage, when you do your shriek, it does sound a little bit like you've just seen a mouse.
Yeah, I am worried myself about the shriek. I am absolutely not going to demonstrate it now, because I think I need to go back to the drawing board on that one, have a chat with my director, Lisa, and say, Lisa, I feel like I'm shrieking because there's a mouse in the room, and I've got to do something about this, and she'll probably agree.
To be honest, Steph, it doesn't just detract from it at all. I was just having a little bit of fun there. That was all.
No, it's fine. It's a difficult one to do, I must say.
You don't want to frighten the audience, do you?
No, absolutely, exactly. That's very good point. Should we talk about frightening the audience actually a bit? Because I don't know how you felt, but a key point to this particular passage is, of course, this man who is there in the synagogue, and it talks about him having an impure spirit, or in an older version, an evil spirit. And he cries out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." And then Jesus says, "Be quiet." And this evil spirit, impure spirit, it says, as you said, comes out, and he with a shriek. How do you take that? For those who never heard this passage before, who may be unfamiliar with the kind of the context of it historically or whatever, how are they supposed to take that? What's going on? Can you shed any light on this at all? Why is it important anyway?
Well, I guess there's a few things that are important. Number one, he recognizes, he knows who Jesus is, Holy One of God. That's a special reference. That refers to God himself, or to anyone who's sort of appointed by God. So he recognizes, again, back to that point of authority, recognizing who that authority is. The question is, I don't know. I'm not sure. It says in the passage why he was there. Whether he just happened to be wandering by, it was in the back of the synagogue. Whether he was waiting, whether he was just waiting for, like spies waiting for something to happen, and they're sending the signal. Whether he just recognised this was God and he had to act. I don't know, but the significance is that Jesus is then demonstrating not just his authority in the way he teaches, but his authority over evil spirits. By casting it out, and taking authority, and therefore demonstrating that there is nothing which is too difficult for God. It is within his ability to do it, and there in that situation through Jesus, and the people around would have recognised it. They would have, this, again, an assumption, this man was known within the local community as being disturbed, as having some sort of evil spirit within him. So again, that is another demonstration of the authority, and not just the authority, but the power of Jesus from God. So I think that's a very significant, and it's something which is picked up in the Gospels, and I think it's also again in Mark. There was another man demon possessed. So it's something. Maybe it's something that Mark wanted to emphasize because of the dramatic part about it. Maybe it's because it's as I was saying, that sort of and suddenly and now and so forth. So it's giving a bit of spice to that sort of story. To sort of sometimes you go and see a movie and they'll just drop something in just to get you on the edge of your seat, just so you're sitting up.
It's a surprise.
Just you're dozing off, and it suddenly comes. I
love what you said there about this man, and I think you're right. If we put it in the context of the story and of the time as well, That explains a lot, doesn't it, about Jesus's authority. And I'm quite taken by the opinion, it's not my own, that actually what he's doing here is doing exactly what he said he was going to do, which was earlier on. I think it was about verse 14. He says that, the kingdom of God is near. So it's like, okay, so in the context, how people would have taken it at the time, if someone like Jesus drives out evil spirits, then actually that suggests that the kingdom of God is coming. He's basically overpowering evil. God, being all good, is overpowering evil. And yeah, it makes it very, very real. I think, if you like, for me, the big elephant in the room, though, in our respective rooms, is we're talking about it in terms of a context biblically, and that would be understandable to anyone, whatever their persuasion. But for some people, and certainly in this kind of postmodern era, the idea of evil spirits and such like is very strange. I mean, just being honest, are we meant to take it literally, or is there another way of looking at it? Because some people say, oh, he was just disturbed. You used that word yourself. He's just mentally disturbed. And this stuff about evil spirits, it's just mythology. Is that your thought?
Yeah. Well, I think. Well, it was certainly my thought when you were saying that. But the first thing, I'll get to the question you raised just now. But the point that came to my mind then was you're looking at in terms of context, is that there is the people who are there in the room in the synagogue with them. It spoke to them there. And obviously, it spoke to people around because they carried that message forward. It speaks to us now through the scripture because we can read it. But there's another dimension as well, because it spoke to Satan. It was telling him, I am Jesus, and I have come on a mission. I've come from God, and I come with authority. Your days are numbered.
Yes.
Now, that's my thought on that. Now, back to the question in terms of, is it relevant today? I think some people go looking for evil spirits where they don't necessarily exist, but I believe the whole thing of a spiritual dimension in which we live is valid. It's as relevant today as it was in the time that Mark was written. I personally have not experienced, I've not witnessed an exorcism, although I have heard of them. But I think it is still relevant that people are influenced and possibly possessed by things, by spirits which are malevolent, which are seeking to not just maybe harm them, but to harm other people. It's a dangerous thing to get into, because I think some people just look at it and say, oh, they're possessed by the spirit of something, or possessed the spirit of something like that. Whereas personally, I believe that we have a lot more is within us as who we are, and so we may be influenced, but not necessarily possessed. So, as I say, I've not personally experienced. I don't know if you have, if you've witnessed it, or these sort of things, but I'm pretty sure it happens. I think in some areas where there may be a little bit more in contact with their spiritual side. And I'm thinking there of some of the areas in Africa or South America or places like that, that these things manifest themselves more because they're much more in touch. I think maybe in more sort of the Western world, in where we are in the UK, we tend to be a bit distant from that, and we experience that in other aspects of our Christian life as well, in terms of the whole materialism and where do we put our trust in God when everything is provided by employment or a nice house or state benefits or whatever it might be. So I think we have a different challenge here in the UK and a lot of Western developed countries, which are not so in other countries, where their focus is much more on the spiritual because of tradition, or also because of need.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. Thank you. I mean, for me, if I was to be asked the question I asked you, I think there's clearly, even from the point of view that the words themselves on the page, there's clearly more at stake than someone who's disturbed.
Yeah.
Because if he was just disturbed, how would one explain what he says to Jesus?
Yeah.
What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. So we can gather from that, this man, or the evil spirit in the man, or whatever it is, knows Jesus's identity intuitively.
Exactly. Yeah.
He can name it.
He's almost suggesting that Jesus is seeking him out. What do you want with us?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are you engaging with us?
And us is quite key here too, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
A representative of the evil forces, not just one person who happens to be disturbed. Yeah. And have you come to destroy us? Well, there's an element there of expectation, that he's almost fearful that this is the time Jesus, who is the Son of God, has come to destroy evil. So he's aware of the implications theologically of Jesus being there. Doesn't feel to me like someone who's just mad. There is something much more. For me, too, the idea of there being evil in the world makes a lot of sense. You know, however you describe it, however it manifests, there are certain things that happen, I think we'd all agree, which can't be explained in many other ways. The Holocaust, ethnic cleansing, all sorts of things which, you know, as individuals, we'd like to think everyone's got this good to them. But unfortunately, the history of man and humankind generally, especially at key moments in history like the ones I've just referred to, suggests that sometimes we're completely swept up by this cosmic influence, for want of a best phrase, which pushes us to extremes of behavior which are absolutely abhorrent. And the way we
I fully agree. I'm currently reading a book on a similar sort of subject as to what is the basis of humankind, of human nature. Is it inherently good, or is it inherently bad? Is the key question that's been discussed. And it's quite obvious that no one really knows, because it sort of swings over the years as to what people believe is right and what is wrong. But I think one of the things that's often missed, I think, when we think of these sort of situations, particularly with this man who was troubled, and other instances within the Bible, is that's still another man, that's still another human, and that so. I think naturally we tend to focus on them and think that they are evil. Whereas ignoring the fact that they are possessed, or they are controlled, or they are strongly influenced by something which is evil, and it's not necessarily them themselves, because it's quite clear that when they are released from this, that they go away a completely different person. So something has been removed from within them, which returns them to be what we would consider to be more of an acceptable, or more a sort of normal human being. So even in that, and other stories we read within the scriptures where the similar sort of things happen, is that person, something has been removed from them.
Yes.
And they are transformed by that. So we read of physical healings, and this is a spiritual or a mental healing, whichever way people want to view it. Something has happened in that person's life, and that person is transformed. They are a human, just like, or they were a human, should I say, just like we are humans now. And that's, I think we can't just take it and label evil and place it upon that person and say that person is evil.
I think that comes out in the story. I'll tell you what we'd better do though, because I know that my good friend Mikey Powell's waiting in the wings now to just play one of his songs. And just to explain, you know Mikey, don't you? He's a worship leader here in Southampton, and he's also director of worship at New Community Church, which we both go to. And he's passionate about leading worship and writing songs. And here's one of them called "This Is Our Story."
We have seen miracles, broken hearts and bodies healed. We have seen revival, seen your promises fulfilled. This is our story. have known bitterness, sleepless nights and desperate prayers, waiting for the answer, clinging to your promises. This is our story. We have seen your goodness and we've never found the end. Hallelujah, King of heaven, faithful and fearless friends. Hallelujah, you go with us, you keep your promises. This is our story.
So, Steve, you're saying about just before we listened to Mikey there about how it's important to realize these are real human beings we're talking about when
Yes.
we do these healings and these exorcisms. I guess you're right, because in this story, what happens is Jesus tells the evil spirit or the impure spirit, be quiet, and that's what happens. He is quiet, I guess, and come out of him, and that's exactly what happens. The man is shaken, and yet this I would imagine the man then at this point is returned back to his normal self. This happens again and again, I think, in the story.
Well, it is, yeah. And we've no idea what his history was. Was he always disturbed? Was it something which came upon him? Was he possessed for this purpose, to challenge Jesus? We honestly do not know. All we know is what is written there. But you're right. Yeah, he has been returned to something of more acceptable. We don't know what that was. We just know that he was no longer troubled as he was before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm remembering, I think perhaps as we speak about this, that another story later on in the Gospels where a man similarly is possessed, and it says he's returned to his right mind.
Yeah.
So it's not just the fact of evil that Jesus is kind of coming against. It's also he's caring for the individual.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
He sees the suffering.
I think that's so. I mean, sometimes you can think about these things like you would in a war film where they just shoot everyone just to protect one person. This guy was not collateral damage. He was someone that Jesus was concerned about. So he wasn't just concerned about the confronting the evil spirit or the evil which was in the man. Yeah. I would suggest he was concerned about that man as a person, as about an individual. And you say, as another instance where he returned to a right mind, that shows some form of, to me, as some form of compassion, some form of interest in that person, because he could have quite easily just smote him down, and you're gone, you're dead, end of the evil spirit. Baby out with the bathwater, but he wasn't. He was concerned about that individual, and therefore remove the problem rather than remove the person.
I mean, Jesus was clearly in a conflict situation here.
I mean, without a doubt, yeah.
But at the same time, there's a sense in which he's prepared to go to extreme lengths to rescue the individual as well. Yeah. Which I guess it speaks to me very much about what Jesus came to do in the first place. So, for Mark, and we'll hear this later on in the series of episodes in this podcast, I think for Mark, the whole reason Jesus died on the cross was to show that compassion for each one of us. And that was extreme. I mean, no one normally would put themselves through that for anyone else. Jesus did that for the whole world, the whole of humankind.
Very, very true. Yeah. So, I mean, when I'm just trying to think how you represent that statement, be quiet. I mean, I think yours is quite a quiet but authoritative way. Is that how you view that Jesus did it? Because most of us who would have thought, if you're confronted with someone like that, it's almost a sort of a snap, be quiet.
Yes.
But
yeah, it's very interesting. I think the only way I can answer that question is to refer you to my director, who Lisa mentioned her before. And I think the reason why I do it quietly is because she's convinced me that Jesus, wasn't without emotion. Clearly, he was a man.
Yes.
As much as anyone else was a man, although he was also God, as we believe. But he was a man who was full of compassion, as we've just said. And although he wasn't the sort of man who would just lose his temper in an irritated kind of I'm fed up with people sort of way. So when he's angry, apparently angry in the gospel, there's no doubt about it, he's angry, but it's in a way that suggests calmness, control, self-possession, compassion as well. So all of those things are mixed into this character, which makes him, and I understand what she's saying, and I agree with it, makes him the unique person he is. So if we were confronted with a situation like that, and let's say for the sake of argument, we did have authority in some way to be able to do something about it, we'd probably be less controlled. I don't know.
Definitely, yeah. It's controlling your temper, controlling your emotions. Yeah. I don't know if someone was cutting across me like that I would necessarily be as controlled.
Yeah, I mean that's the one way of doing it, and I've seen performances, and I've done it myself in a much more shouty way, be quiet in a much more shouty way. But I think the force of calm authority makes better sense, and because it had probably more impact, and it has more influence, I think.
I was just going to say, in your teaching experience, I'm sure you've come across colleagues who can control the classroom by just saying things, and others who have to control the classroom by raising their voice or making some sort of veiled threats. So I think what we're potentially seeing here in Jesus's language is that authority coming through. So he doesn't need to impose that authority. It is just who he is. And so, there's no point in raising his voice with an evil spirit. They know who he is. They've already declared. That spirit has already declared, I know who you are. So what's the point of raising a voice? He just turns around and said, if I shout any louder, will you go any quicker? No. Be quiet.
And it's also true to say he doesn't say very much. He doesn't need to say very much, does he?
He doesn't, no.
Looking at your analogy, if there's a teacher who's kind of not got control of the class and shouts at the class, they would probably go into at great lengths to try and get control. But the more they say something, the worse it gets.
I could tell you stories of when I was at school, and that's exactly. You knew when they'd lost control, and there was others some you respected out of fear, some you respected because you just liked them, and you would just do what they wanted, and others you just played up. Because you knew you could get away with it, and that's just me, not just me. I mean, it was the whole class. We were good, really. We were just high spirits, as we used to call it. But I mean, it's an interesting one when we're talking about evil spirits, because there's one way that God could have approached it, and was basically he could have just sent through the exterminators and just cleared the earth of the evil spirits, and then just come and dealt with his wayward people and said, right, I need to sort this out. But God didn't take that approach, did he?
He didn't.
He took it as it is. He sent Jesus into the situation to resolve it. He came as a human and was faced with the frailties of being within a human form, but still confronting those evil spirits with the power. So it's incredible when you think about it, that someone made up as a human, just as you and I are, with that authority that God had given him to be able to confront evil spirits. It's like a lot of things when we talk about God, there are often more questions than answers. Although the one answer, which is that he is God, to me is unfailing and unquestionable. But there are plenty of other things around it that I will question and I will challenge. But it doesn't affect that one belief, that core belief that God is God, and therefore what he says, I believe. But there are plenty of other things around. You sort of think, well, hang on a minute, if I was God, I wouldn't have done it that way. But then that's obviously a good thing for everyone else, that I'm not God, isn't it?
Well, if anyone else, I would have chosen you. But
to be honest, Steph, you don't have to answer that one.
Yeah. But it's really interesting, Steve. And now you said all of that, I think for me, it once again reiterates the importance of this story, the whole story, not just this passage.
Yeah.
What this represents for me and you, here we are in the 21st century, and everyone else who's listening, and anyone who may not be listening, is there's someone who's come into the world who is God himself, who's supreme good itself, supreme love itself. And he's on a mission here in this story. And the mission has started. The mission has started to rescue the world from evil, whatever, however you describe that. And evil, I would say, we would all agree, I think, how evil could be defined. Something that's going to create destruction, something that's going to create injustice, violence, war, poverty. All of those things are things that we know are wrong. And this person, this man, stroke God, is coming into the situation that we find ourselves in, and he's righting it. He's making it right. And, some might say, yeah, okay, well, why hasn't it happened yet? But it's clear from the story here that this is the beginning of the good news. Right at the beginning of this story, it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
Jesus coming is the beginning, and we're still in the process. So we're looking for a world in the end, I guess, is Mark's message, that is rid of evil. That's
yeah. I mean, it's going back to the point of looking at an individual story. I mean, you can analyze this particular story as many other stories within the Bible and find fault or find encouragement or do this, that, and the other. It's looking at the whole picture. It's looking at Jesus, who he is, and what his relationship is with God. What is the message the Bible is telling? The message the Bible is telling is that we should love God. But secondly to that, the second most important, as Jesus said, is to love our neighbours. And you realize the whole of the Bible is just focused around relationships, about loving one another. And we talked about this guy who was disturbed, and how I think we're in agreement here that Jesus had compassion on him as an individual, as a person. And the message he was giving, we don't know what he said to those people, but I suggest it was probably along the lines of emphasizing how much God loved them and how important they were. And that's the message that to me is one of those core things when I say that it's important that I believe that God is God, but God is love, and that's what the Bible says. And so all those things, you start putting these stepping stones together, and you find you're on a slightly different journey in terms of understanding what that whole thing is. And I think that's what's been demonstrated clearly over the last 15, 16 months, is how much people are concerned about each other, Christians or not Christian. Whatever faith you have or no faith at all, it's inherent within all of us to care for each other. And that's what the Bible is emphasizing and saying that is what God has given us. That is what God is trying to light up again within us, so that compassion, that love we have should be stemmed from a love from God, which then radiates out towards the other people. And sometimes you think, well, that's a lot of responsibility to love all those other people. What am I supposed to do? And then you sort of think, well, hang on a minute, that responsibility is the same for everyone else. Yeah. So if I can think, well, I'm loving 7 billion people, but hang on a minute, 7 billion people are loving me as well if we will follow God. And that's an incredible thought when you think about it.
Yeah,
it's all love. So we we're not on our own. We're not the little God boy with a finger in the dike. We're all standing together, shoulder to shoulder. It's just showing that sort of teamwork, really, I guess, in terms of loving God together and loving each other together. And it's that's what we're seeing. I think when I'm sure that's potentially one of the things when you're doing Mark's Gospel is you appreciate the love of God, not just for you, but for the people you're talking to, the people you're presenting to, the people you're acting for. They understand that the love that you experience day on day is a love that they can experience as well.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I totally resonate with that. It's really moving, actually, Steve. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I do remember there's one, I think it was one particular performance where that came up in such clear terms when I was in the middle of a high street in Watford, and somehow it was this sense of love being everywhere. And I felt it, and they felt it, the audience, and you could feel it. It's like a bubble just enclosing us. It was the most magical, incredible experience. And for me, that kind of typified a little bit, I think, about what it must have been like to be around at the time that Jesus was around, to recognize this man, you know, as purely love, and feeling that attraction towards him, but also that encouragement, as you said, to love each other in the same way.
Well, what came to mind then was, I remember when I was probably about 14 years old or something like that, and we were away. It was with our Christian Union at school, and a lot of the Christian unions across the city had come together, and we would go away for a weekend, and we were there. It was nothing formal. We were all sort of in this church hall, just sort of chatting around, and then suddenly something happened. I have no idea what it was, but we were there, and I think everyone at the time just experienced something. I can feel it now, and getting tingles just thinking about it. But something came over me, and I just felt loved. I don't know what it is. And as I looked around, and I was trying to hide the fact that there were tears coming down my cheeks. And as I looked around, I realised everyone was doing exactly the same. Something had happened to us at that particular point in time. And, you know, to me, and I think to everyone else in that room, it was just the power of God had come over us. We were just overawed with the love of God at that particular point in time. And I think, you know, there will be times when you're performing, that will happen to people. And it may just be to individual people. And I pray that it will actually happen to more people, because it's without a doubt, it will be a great encouragement to you, but it will also be a transformation in their lives as well. When they hear that truth that Mark's gospel is bringing forward, and you bringing it forward in 3D, we can't sit and listen to Thomas Hardy read his stories to us. But in terms of the biblical stories, the stories of Mark, what you're presenting is as close as people potentially can get, and actually see it coming alive and understand this isn't just ink on a page. This actually happened. This is reality. And that's the transformation you pray for in people's lives, that something of God will come into their lives through your performance.
Well, Steve, thanks so much for all your lovely words about I Am Mark, but also for some incredibly insightful thoughts about this one passage and about the story as a whole. It's been an absolute joy and a privilege to have you on the show, and thank you so much. And I really do hope you'll be able to come again one day and do it again, because it was wonderful. Thank you.
I'd love to see it. Thank you very much for inviting me, Steph. It's been brilliant talking to you.
Oh, bless you. See you soon, mate.
Okay, take care.
Bye. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode of Question Mark and don't want to miss any future episodes, make sure to click on the subscribe button. This also means other people can find the podcast and join the conversation. We'd also love if you could leave a review so we know what was good and what we can improve for future episodes. Join us and our special guest next time, where we'll continue to explore the greatest story ever told together. If you want to get involved with the podcast or have any questions or comments in the meantime, please do get in touch using the I Am Mark social media channels. We'd love to hear from you.
We'll light it up, we won't come down, and the sun can't stop us now. Watching it come true, it's taking over you. And this is the greatest show, where it's covered in all the colored lights, and the runaways are on in the night. Impossible comes true, it's taking over you. And this is the greatest show.